The following is a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club. Round 5 of the Fall Classic here in St. Louis. In Group A, Yuri Kuzubov hammered the hammer. The Ukrainian shortens the gap to first as the leaders have drawn. Group B's undisputed frontman, Hovhannes Gabuzyan, had two sharp connected passers that came down like a guillotine on Conrad Holt. Round 6 starts now. 20 international chess professionals compete in St. Louis as USChessChamps.com presents the second annual Fall Chess Classic. There you see Executive Director and Arbiter Tony Rich looking over the field here at the Fall Chess Classic here at the beautiful St. Louis Chess Club in the Central West End. Hello, come on into the studio, Studio B. Welcome. I'm Ben Simon along with International Master Eric Rosen. It's a beautiful day here in St. Louis. You know, they say it's fall. It looks like we're getting into winter pretty quickly. A little chilly outside today.
It is, yeah, it's getting colder, but the action is heating up inside. And we're getting to the point of the tournament where we can start maybe making some better predictions of who's going to come out on top.
Yes, we know the names and faces to watch. And let's get right into it. Here are the standings for our Masters division. We have two players at the top tied right now, Alexei Dreyev and Alexander Lenderman, with 3.5 points. But you can see there are a lot of tailors actually right behind them in this field, and we'll see what develops. It's important to note, though, that Dreyev and Lenderman are slated to play tomorrow. So if the standings hold, that's going to be definitely a game to watch for round 7. Okay, so after 5, let's check out the B group. In the B group, it's the Gabuzyan show for a few rounds now. 1 point lead. And then Brandon Jacobson is his second placer. Now, also important to note, round 7 tomorrow, these two are slated to play, Gabuzyan and Jacobson. So if the standings hold, another clear 1 and 2, I mean, you can't get more exciting than that.
That's true. It's a magical round 7. I know you were talking earlier about the Sinkfield Cup just a couple months ago. Carlsen and Caruana played in round 7, so definitely a round to look forward to.
It's a lucky number. Here is the tournament format for those of you joining us for the first time. There are two 10-player round robins, 90 minutes for the first 40 moves, and then 30 minutes is added on after that for the remainder of the game. There is a 30-second increment from move number 1, and it is very important to note that the players cannot agree to a draw before Black's 30th move, although we had a game end before move 30 today, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on. The tournament schedule is as follows. The games themselves begin every day at 1 p.m. Central Time. We come on the air 2.5 hours later, so 3:30 p.m. Central Time. And please note that on Thursday, October 18th, the grand finale, everything begins earlier because we want to have room for playoffs if necessary. There will be one undisputed winner in each section, Eric. Okay, so social media, we're super active. I mean, you are a renaissance man of social media, Eric.
I'll accept that title.
Yeah, I try to be, I fake it. And so join us not only on USChessChamps.com and YouTube and Twitch, but also on Twitter. Use the hashtag FallChessClassic. We also will be taking your questions and comments from our YouTube chat. You've brought a lot of fine quality chess fans into this, and so I thank you very much for that.
Yeah, I want to thank all the fans for watching. We have a great atmosphere in the Twitch chat. We have Twitch already using the hammer time emotes. We have Justin Bieber, YOLO, Adam AK, so a lot of great fans keeping an eye on this show.
Very nice. So here is what's going on right now in Group A. The 5 games that are happening, well, one's already ended. We have Eric Hansen versus Seth Rahman, Lazaro Brazone versus Ray Robson, Daro Spirits versus Varujan Akobian, Yoon Ludwig Hammer versus Alex Lenderman, and the game that's already ended, our key matchup, Eric.
Right, Alexei Dreyev and Yuri Kuzubov, two very highly rated players. This is the shortest game of the tournament. They ended about half hour ago. The game ended in just 20 moves. Now, you did mention there's a 30-move draw rule, but they ended the game so quickly because of threefold repetition.
So it wasn't agreed. It was simply by a de facto draw.
It was, yeah. If the same position occurs 3 times, that means players can claim a draw, regardless of whether it's before or after move 30. So we can take a look at how that happened. I was actually excited to see this game earlier. It came from one of my favorite openings as the black pieces, this Queen's Gambit declined exchange variation, where black plays a very solid line by putting the bishop on f5. This allows white to play queen f3. And after bishop g6, players enter a queenless middle game. This is a position that I have had countless times myself in both over-the-board tournament chess and online chess. And I usually enjoy playing this from black's side because of the 2 bishops, even though black's pawn structure is a little bit damaged. I usually like these kind of quiet, peaceful middle games where it's more strategic rather than a tactical mess. Now the players developed relatively normally here after b3 attempting to restrict the knight on b6. Black played a very thematic move, pawn a4, trying to create some weaknesses in white's territory with pawn a4. So this prompted white to play pawn a4 himself, and then the bishop came in to b4. Then after some more development, knight e2, black plays this nice move, knight to c8. This is actually a very common maneuver in the structure for the knight to go to d7, to b6, to c8, eyeing this d6 square. And after just one more move, castling and knight d6, this is what we call a Capablanca knight, when the knight is combining very well with black's pawn structure, basically finds a nice place between the pawns, and the knight and the pawns work together to control some very key center squares. Now going forward here, this is actually the moment that players began repeating. After knight a2, bishop a3, knight goes back to c3, bishop goes back to b4. Looks like neither player wanted to really deviate from this repetition, and after a few more times, they shook hands and the game is over.
Was there anything that either player could have done to avoid the draw, or is this just something that was inevitable?
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, there would be other moves. I mean, after bishop to b4, I would think white might be the one wanting to play on to try and get some positional elements going. Maybe a move like pawn f4 to go for pawn f5. Though if white plays pawn f4 immediately, perhaps black could respond with pawn f5 and just close things down. So it's possible that maybe either player could have played on, but I think the players acknowledged that the position was relatively balanced and they didn't want to spend perhaps 2 to 3 more hours fighting, but rather just end it early and take somewhat of a rest day.
Yeah, you get a little bit more of a break for sure. Okay, so let's jump over to Group B. Here are the games that are happening in our Challengers Division. Steven Zirk versus Ashwin Jairam, Brandon Jacobson versus Conrad Holt, Akshat Chandra versus Danish Borosh, Chris Yu versus Elshan Moridiabadi, and finally,
our key matchup of the day, Sergey Azarov against Vovanes Gabuzian. Gabuzian just being so impressive so far, starting the tournament 4.5 out of 5 in a very strong section. He had a very beautiful win yesterday, a beautiful grind down win against Conrad Holt from a position which looked like a draw, but he just kept grinding, and eventually carried home the full point. I do want to take a look at the current position that they have. Some dust has settled. I do want to go back. There is a very interesting moment around move 21 after white played rook to f3. Black had to do something incredibly awkward in this position, given the rook is attacking the pawn on f7. There's not too many ways for black to defend the pawn. Ben Simon, do you see the only black move here to keep the pawn covered?
Well, yeah, you would have to cover it, because if you push it to f6, that's just going to lose a pawn.
Way too many attackers for white, yeah.
Well, knight h8 looks silly.
Knight h8 is a very silly looking move, but that's what
Gabuzian
had to play.
Okay.
It's a bit cringeworthy. The knight just going into the corner, extremely passive. All of black's pieces now in the back rank. But sometimes this is the nature of the Berlin defense. Black just plays passively and just tries to be solid, while it's a question of whether white can try and break through. So going forward here, white did start activating, maneuver the knight to very active d5 square. After rook a e8, it seemed like black had everything under control, but white's next move was just incredibly surprising. I was expecting something perhaps a bit more positional, maybe like c4 or rook d3, but Sergei Azarev played the incredibly fiery rook take f7, just seemingly sacrificing a rook. But if we look a bit further here, if knight takes back on f7, the forks are coming. Pawn e6 is attacking the king and the knight. After the king moves anywhere to escape the check, the knight can be taken, and it's an additional fork, and white would be completely winning in this position. Now, I'm a bit curious if Gabuzian missed this shot, or he knowingly went into this variation. After rook take f7, Gabuzian responded with perhaps a counter fork, king to e6, attacking the knight and the rook. Now, white is not losing any material here because he can bail out with rook take e7, and this is where the position begins to liquidate. After rook take e7, knight take e7, king take e7, material is actually equal. White won back a pawn, which he had lost earlier. After f4, king e6, we have to admire white's position. White has a very nice 3-on-2 majority on the king side. And we should note black's pawns are doubled on the queen side. This is one of the trademark deficiencies for black in the Berlin opening, is that black's going to have a much harder time creating a passed pawn on the queen side. And white already has a very nice, well-defended passed pawn on e5, in combination with the bishop on b2, very nicely placed, against this knight on h8, one of the most ugly pieces I've ever seen. So I do like white's chances to perhaps grind down this position, and if Sergei can win this game, it will be Gabuzian's first loss of the tournament.
We're looking at, for black's next move, maybe knight g6 or knight f7 to get the knight out of there, or is there anything better?
I mean, the knight eventually has to move towards the center, away from the corner. These are the only two legal moves when the knight is in the corner. And the problem for black, after either of these moves, the knight is very much restricted by white's pawns. These pawns are actually incredibly well placed because both f7 and g6 are light squares. The knight would then be trying to fight for the dark squares. But if we notice, all of white's pawns are controlling dark squares. So I do like white's structure here. Playing against this knight is very restrictive. And a very maybe soon plan for white is to simply walk the king to e4 and then just get them rolling, maybe play g4 and f5. And we can imagine that white might just continue gaining space, and black's going to be on the defensive for a long time to come.
Now remember, Gabuzian has a 1-point lead above number 2, so I mean, it's not like he's going to be derailed by a loss here, but it's definitely going to slow him down. He's undefeated in this tournament, of course, so it will be interesting to see what happens as time progresses in this round.
That's actually a good point, that he could still be in clear first, even if he loses this game.
Yes.
Goes to show how big his lead is.
Right. Okay, so now that we've taken a look at our top matchups in each section, let's see what the players are competing for. In our top division, the grand prize, $6,000. That's what the champion's going to walk away with a total prize fund of a very generous $22,000. And our B group, $14,000 total, and the winner walks away with $4,000. And as you can see, there's hardly any losers here, but you know, you want to walk away with more than the $500.
That's very true, yeah. It's not bad money for just over a week of chess.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take a look in Group A at Eric Hansen's game against Seth Riman. We have not talked to the phenomenal chess bra yet, but maybe today is his day. Yes, yes.
We talked to him after his win against Hammer. He had a very good start, but has slowed down since then. If we take a look at the current position, I really admire white's setup. Two very nice pawns in the center, combined with the bishop pair. Seth Riman's last move was pawn to f5, perhaps trying to activate in some way, maybe even better control over the e4 square. But yeah, we can imagine that, okay, white has to do something about this pawn tension. I would perhaps expect white to capture on f5. And then maybe the knight can capture on f5. Now visually, white's position is still nice, but black is going to be looking to poke and prod, especially against these two pawns. Now there is a term in chess for these pawns on c4 and d5. These are called hanging pawns. Even though they're pretty well defended, hanging pawns are two pawns next to each other that don't have any neighboring pawns on the adjacent files. So if we notice, there's no pawns on the B or E file for whites. And what this means is that one of these pawns, in this case white C pawn, is somewhat of a backwards pawn. And I would imagine that black might look to simply put a rook eventually on C8 and maybe start targeting the pawn. If rook C8 combined with knight D6 combined with B5, white is going to have to be very careful here not to allow his pawns to become too weak in this position. Now, having said all of that, I still prefer whites with the bishop pair. For the time being, the pawns are well supported, and we might see some further liquidation. Maybe rook take e8, rook take e8. Bishop might like to drop back to f2 to restrict the knight. And as far as white's strategy goes, he wants to keep his pawns supported, probably very soon activate the king, and then probably get the pawns rolling. This is a bit reminiscent of the position in Gabuzian Azarov, with Azarov's very clear, nice structure, and black not really having much to play for in terms of pass pawns.
So, do you think that Eric has this one? I mean, is this still kind of equal, or do you favor Eric significantly?
If I had to pick a side, I would definitely pick whites. He's definitely the one pressing for a win here. But he is lower on time. He has 12 minutes, just over 12 minutes left to make about 15 moves. And okay, Sethuraman is not at the board. Sometimes a signal that maybe he's just relaxed, maybe getting a snack break or a coffee break. So the pressure is on Eric to try and maximize his assets in the position and try and grow his advantage before he gets too low on time.
I just saw a meter over in Group B go crazy, and I know you're not using it, so let's just get your assessment here of Steven Zirk versus Ashwin Jairam. Group B action.
Ashwin Jairam. Yeah, let's take a look. Let's go back a few moves. Now, glancing at the current position, black's setup looks incredibly menacing with this queen-bishop battery, and white's king being very precarious on g2, especially with these kingside pawns advanced. Let's go back a few moves and see how we got here. It seemed like somewhat of a typical sort of Caro-Kann structure. We already see this battery for black eyeing the h2 square. This means the knight is always tied down to defending h2. After knight f8, looks like black is beginning to optimize the pieces and try and organize some kingside attack. We can imagine that the knight would like to come to g6 and maybe someday f4. Also, the rook would like to come in to d8. I really like the piece harmony for black in this position. After rook a d1, knight g6. And this prompted white to play a seemingly very weakening move, pawn g3. Now, normally this move is okay to restrict the knight on g6, also diffuse this battery. But now there's a target on g3, and it seems like Ashwin took full advantage of that by playing a very nice pawn break, just pawn h4, really putting the question to this pawn on g3. White would really like to perhaps move this pawn on h3 backwards to h2 to support the g-pawn, but we all know pawns can't move backwards. And sometimes that's the problem with pushing pawns so early, is you make the commitment and then you end up regretting your decisions. So this provoked pawn g4, and that's where we see, okay, this diagonal is now again open for the queen-bishop battery. The knight hops into f4 after bishop take f4, queen take f4, king g2. And now a very surprising move, which I'm trying to understand. Bishop takes c4. And the first question that comes to mind is what happens if just the queen takes back on c4? This looks like a bishop which is undefended. What is Black's plan in this position?
Because taking the bishop on f5 doesn't do anything. The pawn retakes. There's no...
Now we do have an update. We have one more move played, where we do see Ashwin's rook came down. Very surprising move, actually. Rook to e3, leaving yet another piece.
Okay, so the queen did take on c4.
The queen did take on c4. And Ashwin just seems to be sacrificing all of his pieces, maybe knowing that there's a very strong attack coming. Now we see this knight is targeted twice on f3 by the queen and the rook. And now the question is, what happens if the pawn simply captures? I believe the idea is queen to g3, going in for the check. The king would be forced back to h1, and then after queen take h3, Black has at least a draw here with perpetual check. This king will have to move back and forth between h1 and g1, and the queen can move back and forth between g3 and h3. Now the big question is there anything more for Black after having sacrificed a bishop and a rook? There's not too many attackers left to actually try and finish off the attack. So I'm wondering if we might see a quick draw here. We see Steven just took the rook on e3. Ashwin playing very quickly, queen g3 check. White has one legal move, king h1. So we're seeing this playing out in real time. Queen take h3. In this case, knight h2 would be a disaster because of queen h2 mate. So king g1 only move. And now, yeah, play is unfolding before our eyes. Are we going to see a repetition?
Well, you know Zerk's okay with it, but I wonder if Ashwin just ran out of steam with his attack. I mean, you think he went into this looking for this forced draw?
It's very likely. I mean, at this level, when you play a move like bishop takes c4, you basically know what's going to happen. And we see Tony Rich coming over, putting kings in the center of the board. So the game has ended in a draw. Seems like both players relatively content with that. You said the meter was going crazy earlier, but usually it doesn't go crazy in these situations where it's just threefold repetition. So
I think it was an issue of me looking at some very, very preliminary analysis before it got very deep, just by chance. But you can check out the same analysis I'm looking at. I'm not really looking deep, just looking at basically meters. Check it out at uschesschamps.com. We've got the Chess24 module live for you with the YouTube feed embedded into it. So there's nothing like it. uschesschamps.com. Click on live.
It would be nice to get Steven Zerk in the studio even after a quick draw. We have not talked to him yet, and he's been coming to St. Louis many times for these high-level events, and would like to get his thoughts about this game. He was playing the white pieces. And this is yet another game this round, which ended before move 30 due to threefold repetition.
Very good point, yeah. Yeah. You can't really stop that. You can't put a rule on that, at least in theory, right?
That's right.
Okay, so what else is happening here in this round? I was looking at Hammer's game against Lenderman. Lenderman is one of the leaders in Group A. What is going on here? We see a queen on the flank and, a rook on the 7th. Two rooks on the 7th. What's going on here?
Yeah, well, a white rook on c2, a black rook on d2, so it's very possible we'll see some trades
black 7th
about to occur. Yeah, this is a game that I was not looking at earlier. We can go back and see how play developed. It looks like they had some relatively symmetrical structure. The main imbalance in a position like this is, of course, bishop versus knight, where I might slightly prefer the bishop over the knight. I really like the bishop placed on f6. Staring down at white's queen side, where all of these pieces on the diagonal could be potential targets. Also, the bishop does a very good job at keeping the black king safe. Going forward here, we see knight e4 played, maybe attempting to play a move like knight take bishop. Bishop move to e5. Rook to c1. So white does have nice coordination with the rooks doubled on one of the only open files. After rook a b8. Seems slightly unusual. Trying to understand this move. What this move maybe attempts to do is free up this rook. We could actually imagine some possible tactics here where black maybe would have liked to play rook d7 with the idea of doubling up on the d file. But now I want to put you to the test. There is a very kind of thematic tactic that white can play in this position. We should notice after black's last move, a rook is left undefended. Do you see how white can exploit this?
The first thing that I'm looking at is f6. I'm looking at somehow maybe performing a check there, but there'd have to be a discover attack. I know the queen on the 4th rank. Am I on the right track here, or am I completely wrong here?
All you have to be is way more confident.
Okay.
And just put the 2 and 2 together. You see the f6, you see the check.
Yes.
But you have to look on the queen side too and see that the queen is being unleashed to attack the undefended rook on a8. And this would be the big problem with rook d7. Leaving the a8 rook undefended, knight f6 is just winning material for white. So that probably explains the rook a b8 move.
Eric, we do have Steven Zirk ready to be interviewed, so we're going to bring him in here in just a moment.
Okay. Well, we'll keep going with this game and see how they got to the current position after pawn to b3. This is very typical when it is bishop versus knight. If you put your pawns on light squares, the dark squared bishop in this case can't really attack these queenside pawns, so there's no more perhaps worries for white about targets on the queen side. And I do want to take a moment and just pause in this position and admire white's setup. Everything's defended. The rooks defend each other. The rook defends the a2 pawn. a2 pawn defends the b3 pawn. Everything defended on the queen side. So white is incredibly solid here. Even though I did prefer kind of the bishop for black over the knight, it seems like a very difficult position for Lenderman to actually break through or make any progress. So we see queen a5 is played. Trying to understand this move. Maybe just putting the queen in a safer place, not allowing rook to c4 to come with tempo. Also putting constant pressure against this a pawn. So if white ever moves this rook off of c2, then the a2 pawn could be undefended. So now white actually played a very aggressive move here, pawn g4, which did not really see coming. But it actually makes a lot of sense given that there is a potential pawn break in the position with pawn g5. And if white could perhaps open the g-file and even get the knight to g5, maybe at some point play king h1 and rook g1, we can see very big potential for white to attack on the king side, not to mention a pawn break like g5 could be supported with a move like h4. So after queen to d5, pawn h4 was played. Very unexpected attack by white, pawn f6, perhaps trying to discourage this g5 break. Rook d2 played, queen goes back to a5, rook now goes to c2. This is a sign that white is probably playing for more than just a draw. If we notice, Lenderman could have, or Hammer could have repeated with rook d c2, but instead plays rook c c2. After rook take d2, knight take d2, and rook d8. This brings us to the current position. We will keep an eye on this game, but I do want to go back to the game that just finished between Steven Zirk and Ashwin Jairam. And welcome to Steven Zirk in the studio. Good to have you here. Seemed like a very quick draw today. Any maybe intention of playing for a win in this game?
I mean, I had intended to, but he found some nice kingside play, and I never had much objectively, and he forced the draw there.
Mm-hmm. So I do want to go through the game, and I know Ashwin surprised Akshat Chandra earlier in the tournament with an Alekhine defense. So in terms of your preparation, did you prepare for the Alekhine, or were you mostly preparing for Caro-Kann, which is opening that Ashwin has been playing a lot recently?
So I did mostly prepare for the Caro, but of course I had the Alekhine ready just in case. I didn't expect him to play it twice in a row, but you never know.
Sure. I know this variation is it has a solid reputation for black after knight take f6, e take f6. Not the easiest line to crack.
The pawns are very strong.
Right. So what was your attempt to try and get the advantage in this position?
So essentially, I just did a pretty slow but principled setup. My thinking is, in the long run, if he doesn't have play, I have the potential for advantage in the endgame thanks to the 4v3 on the queen side. If I can trade.
That's very true. Pieces. Yeah, we had a Berlin going on in another game, and this is sort of similar to Berlin situations where you have potential to make a pass pawn on the queen side. So going forward here, I was actually liking black's position at some point, given that it seemed like he was finding some nice coordination, had this very nice battery with the queen and bishop. Were you scared at any point that your position was maybe getting cracked?
So a little bit. I mean, white should never objectively have been in trouble, but I should have traded on e6 before allowing knight f8, because after knight f8, his play gets quite dangerous.
So bishop take e6, and then
rook takes, most likely. And yeah, here his attack is much slower. I think I can just complete my development and challenge the e-file.
Fair enough. You would play a move maybe like b3 or bishop e3?
Bishop b3, bishop d2, something like that.
Yeah, seems like a position where things could maybe liquidate quite quickly.
Yeah, if the rooks go off the board, I would be happy with that position.
Because after knight f8, it seemed like, yeah, black's pieces were getting in shape, and I saw this move pawn g3, which looked quite weakening, especially after pawn h4. Did you see any other chances for him to perhaps get an advantage in the game?
So I don't think he had a way to force the attack through. The knight on f3 is, once he plays h4, it's very hard to remove. But he could have, instead of forcing the draw, transitioned into an endgame that I think was still double-edged.
Can you show us that?
Yeah, knight takes, king g2, and here bishop f5. So bishop c4 forces the draw. Bishop f5, queen f5, and now rook e2.
Rook to e2.
Yeah, it threatens queen g3, which is crushing, so I have to trade queens. And yeah, I think we could have played this out for a while. I mean, his rook's very active, but of course, his pawns on the king side are nothing to brag about in an endgame.
That's very true, yeah. And it's possible if you go into a position like this, you could play out for a few more hours and it would still be a draw.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is one of the quickest games in the tournament. We had another quick game this round that ended in 20 moves, but I think this is the second shortest game of the tournament. Is this sometimes a strategy to maybe have a quick game to conserve energy before the final rounds and just have more time to prepare?
So, I mean, that is done here and there. Admittedly, I wasn't expecting a quick draw here, but I'm not going to complain about the extra time.
Of course, yeah. If we just see how the game ended, it was you're in the final position, you're up material, but have no way to escape the perpetual check. So I do want to ask, because you got your GM title not too long ago. You've played a lot of Norm events in past years. I've played you at least one of these Norm events that they've had here. What are your goals in chess now that you're a GM? Are you looking to get to a certain rating level or just play more events?
I mean, so some of both. I mean, admittedly, I think 2600 is very much within reach in the next couple of years. And I have some holes in my game I know I can work on. So I just want to see what working on those does.
Fair enough. And do you consider yourself a full-time chess professional, or do you have a job or school that you're balancing with chess?
Right now, full-time chess professional.
Well, very nice. So I'll let you rest, and best of luck in your next games.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back with more coverage from the 2018 Fall Chess Classic.
Question on Twitter from Damas. I should not have pronounced that. That was a bit of a trap, yeah?
For those of you who are new to chess, it might look like ba3 is an illegal move here because white advances pawn 2 squares, not 1. But it's a little something we call en passant. And you can do that, but you have to do it instantly. You can't wait for a move, like let's say play king e7, king g2. And now try, because should I do it?
I'm sorry. This is too funny for words.
This is a software glitch? I'm pretty sure there's not a lot.
Lawrence. Hello, Lawrence. Yeah, I'll play 4 against Lawrence. And now he's going to play something against me which we discussed at length during the course of my stay. Yeah, he told me this is excellent. D5, this was what I was kind of hoping for, because now I think E5 is quite strong. No, Lawrence, this is not how chess works. Sadly, it would be much, much more fun if chess actually worked like this. But I don't think it does. Or maybe it does. Well, that's me regretting what I just said. How did I get from there to here is a little bit beyond me. And what's worse, I will never hear the end of it. My quality of life has just gone downhill tremendously because I'm actually sharing the office with the guy.
Dominating his rivals, winning game after game. The opposition has never been as heated, as fierce over elite chess tournaments in the world.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Fall Chess Classic. I'm joined by another special guest, the youngest player in either field, Christopher Yu. Good to have you, Christopher, in the studio. Now, I do want to ask you, you're one of the only non-GMs playing in the section. What is it like playing against a higher-rated player every round? Is it scary, or you're able to hold your own?
I think it's exciting and it's a good experience, and I tend to do well against higher-rated players. So.
Very nice. And now you're higher rated than me, actually. You're over 2,400 FIDE, and you have 2 IM norms, is that correct?
Yeah.
So is the 3rd norm on your mind for this event?
A little bit, not that much. I haven't thought about it much. I've been mostly thinking about playing good chess or making less mistakes.
Fair enough. That's a great mindset to have. I've been in your situation before, and you always want to focus on the board rather than the external factors. Now, it seemed like you had a solid draw today against Alshan Moradiabadi, who's a decently strong player, hasn't been feeling that well in this event. But take us through the game. Was this an opening that you were expecting, this King's Pawn Spanish opening?
Yeah, I mean, I looked at it, but I was mostly looking at a new line I might play against the Berlin, so I didn't look at this line that much, but it was on my radar. I knew that he might play this, but I could have looked at this more, but I decided to do the same as I did like a couple days ago against Azarov, this modern A3 line.
Oh, A3, which...
Yeah, it's popular recently.
So how far were you prepared in the opening? At what point were you sort of out of your opening preparation?
Maybe around move 11, although I was basically trying to remember what I had looked at several days ago, but I just decided to think about the position all over again, like I hadn't prepared it, just to try to find the best move.
Fair enough. And it seems like a low-risk position where you're, it seems like White has just a very solid position with some natural play. Do you feel like you were better at any point in this game?
Yeah.
So around what point did you feel like maybe the advantage was in your favor?
I mean, here a little bit, but not, I mean, just a slight advantage. Nothing extraordinary.
Now, you were saying just before we started this interview that there was a key moment around the time where you played e5.
Yeah, I think I should have played something like c5. You can just liquidate.
Maybe c5 would keep the pressure in the position, given that.
I saw queen,
like there's
queen
nice-
c6. And now something like, yeah, rook c1.
Rook c1.
If rook e8, just f3. Actually, no, rook e8 you can take, so not rook e8.
Oh, that's true, yeah, with the discovered attack against the queen, and d6
So
is
he should
supported.
probably just go back to d7. Now, I mean...
And you could repeat if you
yeah,
wanted
now
to.
you could play e5.
E5 in this position.
And if he plays queen e8 now, takes on... No, actually...
Seems like a very confusing position.
Actually, go
this-
back,
okay.
yeah. Not just f3.
Just f3, just solid move, and then
Yeah.
d6 is the long-term target.
The position is better for me.
Yeah, it seems like at some point you'll get some slightly favorable structure where you take on d6, and then it's always nice when, especially there's a black pawn fixed on a dark square when there's still dark square bishops on the board. So yeah, maybe there are some chances to grind him down, but I know at this level sometimes one inaccurate move can lead to just an equal position. Now, after you played e5, did you miss the fact that he could play queen e8?
Yeah.
And it seemed like from this point forward, after c take b5, a take b5, we weren't taking a look at this game earlier in the broadcast, but seems like relatively balanced position, just pawns getting traded. And who offered the draw? Did you?
He offered
the
me.
draw?
No, he offered me the draw.
I
My
see.
opponent. I thought about it a little bit, but I couldn't find anything, so I decided to accept it.
Yeah, seems like a very reasonable decision. So you've been drawing a number of games.
Yeah,
I
some
know-
of them have been crazy. Like one I was +5, the other was back and forth, and I think the other one I swindled a bad endgame. So the draws have been
kind of
pretty
topsy-turvy,
exciting.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always this reputation in chess. Draws maybe have a boring reputation, but I know a couple of your games, the game against Zazarov and against Zirk, were very entertaining to watch. Is it usually your goal to play some more dynamic and exciting chess against these top players, or are you looking to just hold your own?
It's hard to say. I'm looking, I guess, to get a complicated position, but I'm just looking to play good chess.
Fair enough. That's a very good mindset to have. Now, let me ask you, what's next for you? I know you said you're homeschooled, so you have more time to travel and play in events like this. Do you have any big tournaments coming up?
I have, I think, World Cadets coming up in November.
In Spain, right? That's next
Yeah.
month? Okay. And any more invitational tournaments where you could potentially get a norm?
Maybe in December, but not really soon.
Fair enough.
In the future.
I have one more question for you. I was first introduced to you by seeing you play in the Pro Chess League, and I know we played just over a year ago. You playing for the Hackers, right? The San Jose Hackers.
Yeah.
Do you plan on playing the Pro Chess League this year? And also, do you plan on doing some more streaming commentary? I did watch some of your commentary for the previous season.
I don't know if they asked me to. It's not necessary. Not necessary. I'm not sure if I want to do it. But I might.
Well, I'm sure you still have time to decide. And of course, your focus for now should, of course, be on the next games to come. So I will let you go. I'll let you rest and prepare, and best of luck in the coming rounds.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we're going to take another quick commercial break, and we'll be back with more coverage from the 2018 Fall Chess Classic.
A moment comes in chess when you need to test yourself at a different level. Chess24 Premium offers the tools that you need to reach your maximum potential, from hundreds of interactive video lessons to becoming part of the Chess24 community. You can analyze with friends or coach your students live. You get 24/7 coverage of chess news and events, access to premium analysis and commentary, and the chance to interact with grandmasters and other top players and coaches. Get advice from the best and even challenge them to a battle. Be the best chess player you can be. It's time to level up your game with Chess24 Premium membership.
Be surprised. Be intrigued. Be delighted. The World Chess Hall of Fame in St. Louis is nothing you'd expect and everything you love. 3 galleries highlight the history, culture, and creativity behind the game. Explore chess in ways you never imagined. It's a one-of-a-kind cultural institution where rare artifacts and world-class art play together. The World Chess Hall of Fame. Mind, art, experience.
You may have heard about St. Louis's world-class museums. Art, history, science, even magic. But you may not know we have an entire museum dedicated to play, with a 10-story slide and a Ferris wheel on top. Don't let all this family fun slide by you. Whose kids it is? St. Lou is always exploring. Anybody?
I don't know. I just have a love for the city, and I've always had a love for chess. I mean, it's addictive, and people study it. They can see it's an unbelievable preciseness and beauty to the things that occur on the chessboard.
I want to wish you congratulations, happy birthday, 10th anniversary, and wishing you another happy 10 years to come.
Happy 10th anniversary to the St. Louis Chess Club and Scholastic Center. May there be many more.
I want to congratulate the Chess Club of St. Louis on 10 years and hopefully many more and a very bright future and a lot of success ahead.
Thanks for a great first 10 years, and I hope I'll continue to be playing here for the next 10 years and a couple more decades after that.
I think that without the St. Louis Chess Club, chess in the United States won't really be the same.
I would like to say thank you to Jeannie and Rex for all they've done. The sort of generosity of spirit they have is something special, and I'm very grateful to them.
It would not be an exaggeration to say that the Chess Club and Scholastic Center of St. Louis changed my life, and I'm very grateful for everything it's done for me and for chess here in the U.S. and around the world.
It's been a wonderful ride. You've done so much for chess. Thank you so much. I'm eminently grateful for what you've done for this game, and we're looking forward to the next 10 years.
And I wish everyone to continue having this amazing fun for the next, I don't know, century or so. All right.
I'm really thankful to everyone here who has helped me at the club, Tony Rich, Joy Bray, and of course Rex and Jeannie Sinkfield. So many great events have happened over these past 10 years that I've been involved in, and I'm looking forward to everything that will happen in the next 10 years as well, so to the future.
Hello, chess fans, and welcome back. Wow, it's been a while, hasn't it, Eric?
It's been so long, yeah.
Ben Simon here with International Master Eric Rosen for Round 6 action of the Fall Classic. Now, Eric, we were looking at Eric Hansen's game earlier with Setherman, and he had what you called the hanging pawns. Well, he's pushed at least one of them. Let's take a look at the game.
That's right. A lot has came off the board since we last saw this game. Now there's just one pawn on D5, rather, and seems like Eric is in the driver's seat. Let me update the board and see how play was progressing. In this position, White has been keeping the initiative, played bishop to h3, hitting the rook on c8. After rook f8, White keeps initiative further, bishop to e6 check, forcing the king into the corner. And now it's Hansen to move. He is taking his time here. About 3.5 minutes left to make 7 more moves. I do like his chances. He just has to manage his time. But it seems like White has everything going for him. Pass pawn defended by the bishop, and White has a more active king too, which is a very important element in endgames like this, where you want your king centralized. In this case, White can consider just walking the king up the board to help support the pawn, maybe even help the pawn advance and kick this knight around from b6. So it is a question what to do here for White. And one of the first moves that come to mind is a simple rook to b1, simply skewering along the b-file. If the knight moves anywhere, it's going to leave this pawn just undefended on b7. If knight to c4, we could imagine the king will walk up. Now the knight could move back to d6, defending the pawn, but I would imagine the king is happy to walk up further, perhaps to d4 first, or maybe start by taking the pawn on h7, and then later playing king d4, maybe king e5. I like White's chances here.
Yeah, it looks really good for Eric Hansen. Would Black even want to take the h7 pawn back after that capture that you just played?
Oh, going in that line. Well, we can imagine that, okay, let's say White starts out by capturing on h7. It would be very likely that Black would have to take, in a lot of these lines, when White takes on h7, the threat is actually to play bishop g8, which is a very aesthetic move. But it would create a formation where the bishop defends both pawns, and the h7 pawn also defends the bishop. So Black would not want to allow bishop g8 and almost definitely take back on g6. Now Hansen opted for a perhaps trickier move. Rather than playing pawn take pawn or rook to b1, Hansen has brought the rook to e4. I really like this move. The idea is that Black cannot take on g6 because this would allow the h-file to open and White would have mate in 1 with rook h4. So Black is a bit stuck here. This move rook e4, it's both aggressive and restrictive. It prevents this knight from coming to c4. So not only does White have ideas of putting the rook on the h-file, but now White also has ideas of playing rook to b4, attacking the knight, and controlling the c4 square. So rook b4 is a threat to win a pawn. I would be very uncomfortable here as Black. Now, Sathurman does have 10 minutes left, so he does have some time to perhaps calculate and figure out his options. But I really like the Chessbrah's position in this game.
There's another game that in Group A that caught my eye because there is a big open file there. The C file is blown wide open in Daro Spirits versus Var Akobian, and I think we should take a look at it. Right now, Daro just moved his queen off of the C file over to E2. What's happening here, Eric?
This just looks like a big mess. Just like all four center squares are occupied by something. We have to go back a few moves and see how this is unfolding. Let's go back to a quieter position, maybe around here. Looks like Akobian is the one dictating play. White is moving backwards, Black is moving forwards, knight b5, attacking the bishop on a3. Bishop c1, very passive move, but really the only safe square for the bishop, given that Black does have this battery along the long diagonal. Black is controlling these two dark squares that the bishop would like to access. So bishop c1, trying to stay alive. After knight to e5, Black just keeps moving forward. Now we see perhaps a surprise move from White, trying to grab space, pawn to e4. We should notice that e4 is very well supported by the knight, the pawn, the bishop. So e4, nice attempt to perhaps try and remove this bishop and maybe open the position in White's favor. Now, Akobian simply ignored the e4 pawn and goes forward with his own counterplay, knight to d4. And this is where things just start becoming a complete mess. There's so much going on here. I mean, this bishop is still attacked, but now Black is counterattacking the queen, attacking the knight, attacking the f3 pawn twice with both knights. And again, this is one of these positions which just make my head hurt. And I really pity these players for having so low time and having to try and navigate through such a complex position. Now the knights did get traded, and after knight take d4, pawn take d4, this unleashes the c file for this rook on c8. So Black is still keeping the initiative. The queen had to move. Queen moved to e2. The bishop dropped back to b7. So it's interesting, the bishop was attacked, but black found some counterattacks for a couple moves. Now finally brings the bishop to a safe square. And now we see a very aggressive move from white, pawn f4. Perhaps shifting the momentum. We saw Kobian was dictating play, but now it's white who's making the threats, trying to push this knight backward. And if the knight moves anywhere, I can imagine that white would like to play e5 and just try and fix a pawn structure, kick the bishop on f6. I do like f4, and it's a question of whether black wants to move the knight or perhaps start by trading on f4, try and open up the g-file. But white could take back, and the looming idea, I was about to say the looming idea of e5 is still maybe present in the position, but now I'm realizing that the queen is targeting the bishop on g2, and there could be some potential mating ideas for black against the g2 bishop if we imagine knight f7. e5 would be a tragic blunder due to queen take g2 checkmate. So we might see that Jacobian would like to open the g-file in this position, starting with this pawn capture. And then it'll be a question whether white wants to take back with a pawn or take back with the bishop. But we see Jacobian is still thinking in this position, and the time is dwindling. I mean, Sweerts has 34 seconds. With the 30-second increment, this means he played his last move with just 4 seconds left. Jacobian seemingly has a lot of time compared to white's very low time with over 2 minutes left. And in such a crazy position, with still a whopping 12 moves to play, we're going to inevitably see some fireworks happen very soon.
Yeah, there's no chance for perfect play here. This is going to... You think someone's going to make a mistake?
I mean, I prefer to be in a Jacobian spot. I mean, he has the slight time advantage. And I would highly expect blunders to start unraveling, especially in such a complex position.
And did Jacobian just take on c1? Or
he did. Just a complete surprise, given that I thought the focus was on f4, but again, we see the nature of the counterattack. Rook takes e1. This appears to be some kind of exchange sacrifice. But if we notice, he's removing this bishop, which was defending f4. So perhaps his idea is that after rook takes back on c1, he could take on f4 and have a very strong attack for being down the exchange. Meanwhile, Sweerts is to move.
I wonder how much time he actually has on his clock.
Not
sometimes
sure if we could zoom in further there.
Yeah, sometimes those digital clocks, they get a little bit off.
Wow, this is just a back and forth of counterattacks.
Yeah.
He's 35.
Yeah, he was down to 5 seconds. Okay.
And Sweerts just ignored the rook on c1 and goes along with his center play, pawn take e5. And Jacobian has just played a move. I don't know if we can zoom back and see what move was played. Pawn take e5, attacking the bishop. And instead of taking back on e5, Jacobian takes on d1. So this is just a complete mess. Now the rook is hanging on d1, the bishop is hanging on f6. Looks like one more move has been played. Now white cannot afford to allow rook take f1, so it looks like he took back with his rook. Now we probably will see bishop take e5, just recapturing that's what Jacobian has just played. And now, okay, a little bit of dust is settling, and somehow material is almost balanced. Now black is up a pawn, so I do like Jacobian's chances here, given that it seemed like the tactical variations worked out, and he's up a pawn. He has the 2 bishops. Seems like very good control in the position, but there are still some forcing moves to be played. Looks like Sweerts just grabbed the pawn on f5. The position is opening up, and it's still very complex. Now the bishops are staring at each other. These pawns are staring at each other. It's a question for black. Do you perhaps take on g2 first? Do you take on f5 first? Looks like he did take on g2. King take g2 played very rapidly. Now I would expect e take f5. Actually, there's a couple candidate moves. There's also queen b7 check, but that would leave the bishop undefended. So e take f5 was played. And it's very important whenever you have a quick move in cases where it's just a recapture that you play it quickly, making sure to get the most of the 30-second increment. And okay, Sweerts still has under a minute. Kobian keeping his time above 2 minutes, which is may not seem like a lot of time, but it's enough to perhaps avoid any completely careless blunders. Now we see knight to d3 has been played. Seems like white has a little bit of compensation for being down a pawn, given that the knight is very nicely placed now on d3, blockading the pawn on d4, also pressuring the bishop on e5, which is now attacked twice by both the knight and the queen. And we should also notice that black is really overextended here, having pushed the pawns on f5 and g5. It's a bit weakening to the black king. So there's issues that if the bishop moves anywhere for black, there's ideas for white of playing queen to e6 check, or like maybe bishop f6, the queen can start infiltrating, and white is getting some counterplay.
Man, this is just a heavyweight slugfest right here. It has kind of, it's not as, the heart palpitations aren't as frequent now since some of the pieces came off the board, but man, that was a crazy...
But we can still feel the tension
Yes.
just based on their expressions. I mean, Sweerts leaning in. Kobian seemed like he was about to make his move, still about to make his move, reaching his hand over his head, but seems hesitant. Seems like he's maybe not sure of white's counterplay in this position. And now his time is ticking down. Kobian has actually less time now than Sweerts. See Kobian there just taking a quick glance at the clock. Always have to keep the time in your peripheral vision, making sure you're not losing on time.
And there's still 8 moves to be played until they get that additional half hour on their clock.
And
So
you should definitely stay with this game until they make time control. Queen b7 check, gaining time, forcing white to somehow get out of check. But this doesn't really solve the problem of this bishop on e5 now being attacked twice. And I'm not sure what Kobian is up to if white plays just a simple retreating move, king g1. Seems like black is still going to be under pressure, and it seems like black's king is a lot less safe than white's king. So now time is ticking down here for Sweerts. Looks like there was a time update, given that Rosen is now back over 2 minutes. I'm not sure how that happened. Maybe the clock times aren't entirely accurate.
yeah, those increments don't get added automatically, it seems sometimes. There is a little bit of a delay. So that's why you might see sometimes the clock tick down to 0. Well, their actual clocks on the board don't say 0. It's just that there's an increment that hasn't been added on to our relay. So could it happen? Could they actually hit 0? Absolutely. But most of the time, you will see it on the relay much more frequently than it will actually happen.
I mean, I've had games myself where the player will get down to 1 second, make their move, and then get 30 seconds left to play. So sometimes it gets very close. We see Kobian here retreated the bishop to g7. And now I'm realizing that if Sweerts goes in with a move like queen e6, looks like it's just a simple double attack, attacking the king, attacking the f5 pawn. But Kobian does have a nice defensive resource here, queen f7. Blocking the check, defending the pawn, and keeping everything under control. And with this resource, it seems like maybe Kobian will hold on to the pawn advantage and perhaps be the one playing for a win. Sweerts did not play queen e6. Instead, he played rook to e1, simply creating the battery on the open file. I do like this move, just a simple improving move, keeping the tension. Sometimes cases like this, especially when white is down material, the goal is to keep the tension in the position and make sure that things aren't coming off the board too quickly and there's still room for the opponent to blunder.
I just got an update, Eric. The other Eric Hansen, has just won his game against Seth Riman, We saw him making progress. We didn't really see him putting the hammer down. But yes, Setherman has just resigned. They have just shaken hands, apparently, I'm told. And so we might have Eric Hansen down here. That'd be a treat.
I'm sure the online audience would love to see another Eric interview in the studio. Just glancing at the final position, we see that this pawn on d6 just too strong. The king is well supporting it. Pawn on g6 was maintained for the full game, and Setherman had enough in this position. I do want to go back and keep an eye on the Jacobian game.
Yeah.
Given that still both players are scrambling to make move 40. Time situation, both players look to be under a minute. Just going back, after rook e1 was played, rook f8 is played, reinforcing this pawn on f5. Now I'm perhaps fantasizing here about someday for black playing pawn f4, maybe trying to create a kingside attack. And it could get very messy if the king side opens up further, and both kings still being on the king side, maybe both players playing for some sort of initiative against the opponent's king. Speaking of initiative, we see queen h5 was played, just targeting the pawn on g5. I do like this move from white, just a simple attack, putting the question, how does black defend this pawn? I mean, black could play a move like h6, but this opens up a hole in g6. Perhaps white would be happy to jump in and just keep constant pressure in the position. So it looks like Jacobian is the one thinking here how to defend the pawn on g5. Oh, a move was played, and it doesn't look like he defended the pawn, actually. He played queen a6. Swerts very quickly took on g5. Wow, this is getting scary for both sides. This knight on d3 is undefended. Looks like Swerts is banking on the idea that if the queen takes on d3, there will be rook take e7.
The queen has taken on d3.
And we see this unfolding before our eyes, expecting rook e7 to be played very quickly.
It was.
And then it's a question, does black have enough defense here, at least to not get mated? I would expect black to have at least a series of checks against the white king. We should note there's also rook f7 present in the position. Now, one potential outcome is if rook f7 is played, white could simply repeat moves, rook e8, rook f8, rook e7, and doesn't seem like there's anything to play for. Looks like Jacobian's going to repeat at least once. Rook f8 is the only legal move. And then we're going to see rook e7. I'm expecting Jacobian to think at some point. He might repeat another time, or maybe he'll start thinking here. But it's a question of whether these checks against the king lead to anything. Because there are two potential checks. Unfortunately for black, the black queen is completely out of play. There's no way for the queen to immediately defend g7. Tony Rich walking in there. You just give Jacobian a bottle of water.
I'm not really sure what happened. Maybe it was like a blueberry yogurt. Maybe it was a sign.
Well, that makes me hungry. Yeah. Anyway, okay, the game is continuing. After... Okay, so after rook e7, queen b1 has been played. The king's going to have to walk up. Ooh, I see an idea here for black. The king has to walk up to the second rank.
Yeah.
Wherever it goes, black can play queen to b2, checking the king again, keeping initiative. And then wherever the king moves to again, black can defend via the long diagonal by playing pawn to d3. And I think Swerts is now realizing this, that black is not needing to go for the repetition, but rather is just holding on to the bishop. I think Jacobian is just winning in this position. If king f2, queen b2 check, if the king moves back, d3, the bishop's defended, black's just up a piece, and this d pawn is rolling. There's one other line, if rook e2, then, I mean, just queen c3, and white is also running out of attack given the rook is now just passive on e2. So let's update the board. They have made move 40. Seems like Swerts is going to be taking a long think in this position, but realizing his inevitable doom, given that Akobian has found the way to escape this repetition, and just it should be, assuming I'm not missing anything, it should be an easy win for Black.
Eric, I've been informed that Akshat Chandra has hung a piece against Danish Borosh. Let's take a look at this Group B game.
I mean, we've seen situations where pawns have been hung, but pieces hanging, that's a different story. I'm trying to find this game. Looks like another complete mess and another time pressure situation. Would be nice to get a video view of the players. I want to go back and see what is going on. Seems like it was a complete mess for many, many moves. Now we have seen early in this tournament that Akshat has been having some time management issues, so perhaps the blunder was provoked by just spending too much time. Now I am counting material here, and Akshat having the white pieces is up a pawn, but after knight to e5 seemed like Black is having some very nice initiative with the knight hitting the queen on g4 in combination with this very nice battery along the f-file. Also this very weak f3 square, given that the knight can land very soon on f3. Very scary looking outpost. Queen take e4 was played, white goes up 2 pawns, and then knight take d5. Yeah, that's just a free pawn in the center, given that it's supported by the rook and the queen. Rook dc1, a6, bishop a4, and now knight f3 check. I think this brings us to the current position. I'm not seeing where Black is winning material, but this seems like a very, very pleasant position for Black, and seems like the momentum is just very much shifting in the favor of Danish Borosh, who hasn't had the best results so far, but if he can score a win in this game, it'll be a very nice performance. Now we will get back to this game, but I do want to welcome special guest Eric Hansen in the studio. Good to have you here again. Seemed like a very nice kind of technical win from the opening, like very nice positional play.
Yeah, I've never played this variation before, but I know that Magnus played it this year in Tata Steel, and I was commentating on that event, so I figured I need to use the time I'm putting in. I don't get a lot of time to train these days, but at least I'm commentating, so at least follow these guys. And he went for sort of a provocative approach.
Now we should note time on Sicilian. This is an opening that I play as Black, so I was intrigued in the opening in this game because play very similar lines.
He plays a lot against e4, so I didn't have any. I just decided at the board, let's try something different. Maybe he prepared against me, so followed this. I guess this is sort of standard.
This is all very standard.
And d5, take.
Now, as far as I understand, e5 is one of the main moves here. Is there a big difference between playing e5 and going for e-take d5?
I guess, well, you just get more of an open position by taking with d5, but I honestly haven't checked. I just followed Magnus, and I thought that would be a safe approach. Get some sort of small edge, and I'd be happy with that. Even if it's, I mean, in this whole variation, white doesn't get a lot, but you get a little bit of a small push, not necessarily an advantage, but you get these active pieces, this nice bishop on d4, and you can try to, like, you often get like a slightly better opposite bishop endgame with rooks on the board. Knight c5, I think that's how their game went, and then Black sometimes takes here, or at least that's the only, if I was following the game, that's what happened. And then white queenside castle, and played, let's say, bishop d7, queenside castle, and queenside castle. So I think that's how the game went. Not much for white, but
did Magnus end up winning that game?
He won against Matlakov, but it's at least, I mean, you can try for a little bit, and I didn't mind. I didn't need a really crazy game.
Of course, yeah. Seems like a good style to play, especially if the world champion is going into the same
it's an annoying opening anyways. Black gets quite a bit of counterplay, so I thought this was a good way to try to restrict him. So the reason it's provocative is, by putting his knights like this, I always have this c4 move. For example, c4, and I got it, and usually white's happy to open up the bishops, undouble the pawns, so that's why I mean it's a little bit provocative to to allow this. Maybe it's okay, but I thought I played very naturally. Just tried to open up for the bishop, bishop pair, and put my pieces on the good squares. I think it was critical, if we fast forward a little bit, f5. Yeah, after c4, sorry, g4 was nice first. The idea being kicking his bishop off of the c8 to h3 diagonals. In the future, the d-pawn, if it starts rolling, that bishop will be a little offside on g6. And then c4. And now, if black has something here, then it has to be now, because afterwards it felt like my play was pretty natural. I just pull my bishop back and push the pawns, and it's a little, well, it's very dangerous.
So do you think he had any other better options than knight d6? Because it seemed very pleasant.
Knight
for
d6, I was very happy to see. I wasn't sure about b5. b5 is what I spent all my time on. And the first move here is bishop b6. And let's say rook d7, and now bishop takes e4. If bishop takes, you have to do rook takes, because now I have c5. And you can't allow the pawns like that. So rook takes, and now we were just looking at it right after the game. I was considering a couple options, either c5 here or rook takes e4. Rook takes e4, bishop takes e4, rook e1. I'm threatening the back rank, f5. I take. Black can't take back, because if you take back, rook e5. I hit the bishop with tempo, and now I'm threatening c5, and d5 is protected. But instead, he should play bishop d3 after I take on f5. And maybe black's holding in this variation, because I'm going to lose a pawn, as far as I know. I mean, there are some tricks here. For example, bishop c5, threatening rook e8 and rook f8 mate. But if he throws in king f7 first.
That's a nice line. I'll just show that for the viewers, that it's kind of unexpected mates with the king and king being attacked by the rook. So,
but if
king
f7,
first.
it feels like white's may not have enough here. Once I lose one of those pawns, it blockades and opposite bishops. It starts getting really annoying. So instead, probably wasn't going to go for this. I was going to go for the move c5 after bishop takes e4. Sorry, rook takes e4 for rook e4. Rook e4. Bishop takes, rook takes c5. And now one of the critical lines is rook takes d5. Rook takes d5. Rook takes e1, king d2. Rook probably has to drop back to e8. c6. And doesn't look like he's in time.
Yeah, this pawn's just
c7
rolling.
and rook d8 is just quick enough. Yeah, and this is another point why the bishop on g6 is really important to kick it off. Not only is it not covering it, but it can't go to f5 very easily. Although now, wait a sec, bishop e4, rook d6.
So there would be maybe bishop e7 in some cases.
Right, so let's say
king
f6.
F6, yeah.
c7. Yeah.
Bishop b7.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like white's on the verge.
On the verge, but it might not be that.
It's the nature of opposite color bishops.
I saw some variations like this, but it was getting a little fuzzy, and I was getting low on time. So it wouldn't surprise me if there was one way to hold the blockade. Maybe I have to improve on that line. Not sure how.
I mean, it's always nice to be in the driver's seat, though, where like all it takes is maybe one inaccurate move for the opponent to just be lost.
Yep.
And yeah, it seemed like the game was just in your favor in what was played out, knight d6, and then it's very instructive.
Yeah, I didn't calculate bishop g6, even though it's tempting to just like take and play bishop b6, for example, and start pushing. But I thought it was really nice to keep the bishop on f1 and support the pawns, and because here, let's say rook takes e1. Rook takes e1, rook d7. And you see some light square blockades like c5, knight c4 is not really ideal for me. Because the knight, it doesn't push very easily. So I think bishop f1 was correct, and the back rank is the issue, because you never have like knight c4, rook c8 ideas. Because, for example, take on e1, let's say, first.
Yeah, just king
d2 and
yeah,
it doesn't work. So if you can't stop the pawns, then you're definitely in trouble. And so we played f5 here, getting rid of the back rank. Now bishop b6, rook c8, c5, takes, knight e4. I thought this was clever. I knew what he was going for because I was very tempted. Rook takes e4, f takes e4, d6. I want to play just d7. And for example, let's say bishop e8. Well, then I'll play bishop check, king over, and bishop e6. Yeah, getting the two bishops. And he just in a bind. But instead, he actually has the move rook f8 here. And let's say bishop check. Well, now bishop f7. I can't take because then the rook will take on f7 and just blockade on d7, and then I'm probably like losing. And okay, I can try to, yeah, I'm not, so black's in time there to get something covering d7. So
interesting.
It's very tempting. Instead, I found a nice line: take on f5, knight takes c5, take on g6, knight d7 check, king d2, knight takes, bishop h3. And you get one of these really nasty binds. And this is around move 35 to 40, where we're getting a long time. But I put a check, the king moves, and he's just stuck pretty much forever. Because even if you, well, you don't even want to take on g6 in some lines, because the h file might be checkmate. So
yeah, we saw it around here, where it just seems like black is so restricted, and you have everything under control.
Yeah, rook e4 is nice, covers the checks, threatens rook h4, rook b4, everything's covered, and I think this is just lost. I actually, after knight c8 here, rook h4, h6. Maybe I'm not supposed to take. I mean, the rook endgame is winning, but some people would probably just enjoy the torture here. So let's say rook c4, knight d6, rook c7, and you just can't move.
Yeah, black's just stuck. Like this king is so sad on h8.
You just can't move. So this might be, yeah, if you like torturing people, this looks. At some point, I'm going to force Zugzwang.
Yeah, just some cruel and unusual punishments. Just to show how the game ended.
Yeah, like I hope he didn't have something here. I just figured this was a technical win. Moving the king up, now d6, yeah.
Just push him, yeah.
And he just, resigns. Cause, well, I think everyone's been on the wrong side of where your king is just stuck with his pawn on g6, and the rook's going to come on the 7th, and, well, everything will just fall.
That's right. Now, this game reminds me of a song that you have on Spotify.
Yes.
This Push 'em Baby
Push 'em
song
Baby. Yes.
featuring Yasser Sarwan. Do you ever have that song stuck in your mind in like a serious tournament game?
I actually don't. A lot of people tell me that they have the song stuck in their head and they really like the song. I mean, I like the song, but it's not what's playing in my head. I need something a little faster paced.
Fair enough.
I definitely have some like techno going on or something that's a little faster. I'm not sure if Yasser's voice in my head is a good or bad thing, so I try to...
Depends on what you're saying, I guess.
But I did think during today's game that, I mean, Eric, you got the pass pawns. You have to do something with them.
Of course. And do you have any like future songs on the way?
We didn't make it. We'd love to do it. I can say that in 2019, Amon's going to release a rap single. Yeah.
Well, that's
so
exciting, I'm sure.
I don't have one. Well, I might be contributing to the beat or something, but he's going to be planning to release something in 2019. So we're definitely excited for that.
I'm sure people all over the internet will be looking forward to that. One last question. I see that you have been streaming past couple of days. Is this just a matter of blowing off steam, just kind of interacting with the audience, or? Sort
of, but at the same time, just haven't streamed for a month, and it's been a while, and we set up, a stream studio here, and I haven't really used it, even though we've had it for like 5 months. I've been traveling a lot. So I want to enjoy the office setup, miss the channel, been away for a while, and it is a decent way to kick back and relax, especially after even when I lost the games, I came on stream. I was just chill out and yeah.
I can relate. Will there be a stream tonight?
Probably.
Probably. Okay.
I got to keep up the. I'm not superstitious, but I got to keep up the roll right now.
Sure.
The streak.
Well, if you do stream, maybe we can raid or host you when this broadcast ends. But I will let you go and prepare for the next games and get a stream in. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Eric.
And we will take a look at the remaining games in play. Let's go and look at the Akobian game, which seems like Akobian has emerged victorious after having that very nice resource that we saw earlier, where it seemed like the game was on the verge of being a repetition when we saw this rook come to e7. The rooks repeated for a couple moves, but then we saw a very nice resource for Kobian. If you're just joining us and you want a nice puzzle, I would encourage you to perhaps pause it here and find the very nice resource for black. Queen to b1 was played, king g2 and queen b2 check, and then after king to h3, d3, black was able to hold on to the extra piece, keep the king safe, and then the rest of the game seemed very much one-sided. Black finishing things off in decisive fashion. So I do want to welcome back Ben Simon to the studio. Any news for us? Any more developments in either group?
Well, there's only 3 games left, and the game that actually is looking really tilted toward one player is Hammer versus Lenderman. I'd recommend looking at that before we end the broadcast today.
Let's do it. See amazing king power by the Hammer for white in this position. We'll try and bring up the board here shortly.
Now, Hammer's trying to get back in this thing. He against Lenderman, one of the top dogs in this section. Lenderman tomorrow is facing off against Dreyev in battle of leaders, but if Hammer has his way in this game, and it looks like he might, then maybe a little wrench is thrown into our preview for the inevitable key matchup tomorrow.
Oh, that's very true. I mean, I would really like to get the board up to show the viewers. We take a look at Hammer's king just in the heart of Lenderman's territory, and it seems like the black rook, the black bishop, completely out of play, and it seems like white is actually formulating a checkmating attack, given that there's immediate mating ideas with rook to c8, followed by knight g6. If the king ever moves to h7, there will be the looming idea of rook h8 mate. I don't see any defensive resource for black in this position. There has been a move played, pawn to f5. Seems like a very desperate attempt by Lenderman, maybe trying to open the f-file so the rook can come back into play. I would expect rook c8 here. If the king moves to h7, this is just lost after knight g6. There's no good way to stop rook h8 mate. This would mean that black is forced to play bishop f8. And then there's some defensive tricks, because if the knight hops into g6 right away, then black can take on g4, unleashing the rook, and then it's white who has to maybe worry about this passed g-pawn without an immediate way to checkmate the black king on g8. So I would expect that white can simply take on f5, and I really like the chances for Hammer to win in just a few more moves, because if they get to this position, knight g6 will land on the board. You can see Lenderman there kind of leaning back, seems already defeated based on posture. Hammer had a very nice posture there, just leaning forward, playing his moves confidently. And as play is developing, looks like this position has been reached. He did take on f5, and I would expect resignation any moment now by Lenderman.
Let's take a closer look at the players themselves, if we could get a shot, as we expect the end of this game to come any moment.
Yeah, rook d2 was played, and knight g6. I think we might actually see, rook d6 check. It's actually caught me off guard here. Rook d6 is almost checkmate. There's one legal move, king take e5, and now it's about time. Oh, Lenderman keep fighting. Rook f6 does defend the bishop. But black is completely paralyzed here. I mean, Hammer has an e-pawn in this position. I mean, earlier with Eric Hansen interview, he was talking about torture, and it seems like that's what we have in this position. Maybe white isn't mating right away, but white's just torturing black in this position, given that it's full domination. The bishop is stuck on f8. Lenderman, hand on his head, can't be feeling too happy, given that he was a leader in this tournament, and now a loss will put him a bit behind Dreyev going into tomorrow's round.
Right, yeah, he will be in second, just tied with a whole bunch of players. Kuzabov, Akobian, and Hansen, actually. So that will be the leaderboard going into tomorrow.
Pawn e4, very nice move by Hammer. This pawn on e4 is a passed pawn. I would not be surprised if his plan is just to move the king.
And
there we go. Just handshake. Lenderman realizes his doom. It's Tony Rich. Puts the kings in the center of the board. Very nice win by Hammer.
Yeah, yeah. So this is a good time to take our curtain call for the day, I think. It's been a really fun day. A lot of decisive games, 3 interviews. They were all really great. We got to talk to Chris Yu. Everybody in the chat loved Chris Yu. I said, remember
they were
that
saying,
name.
Yeah, I saw some very nice words. Very, very impressive to handle himself like that as a 12-year-old. Just very mature, a lot more mature than a lot of chess players much older than him.
Right. Let's take a look at our results today, if we have them prepared. We have just one game going on live in Group A, and that's between Berzone and Rosen. The other 4 games have finished. Hansen with a victory, Hammer with a victory, and Akobian with a victory. So Dreyev and Kuzubov have drawn theirs. And over in Group B, we did have 4 games finish already. Same situation. So let's take a look at what we are looking forward to tomorrow in round number 7 in Group A. So we had a little asterisk next to one of these games as one really to watch, and it still is. It's just not clear, the clear top 2. And we're looking at Lenderman and Dreyev there at the bottom. Still an incredibly important game that maybe could decide this thing.
Right, and especially with Lenderman's loss just a couple minutes ago, we can imagine that he doesn't want to let his momentum slip too much, and he'll have to regroup before tomorrow's big game.
And here's the round 7 pairings for Group B. And Group B has a similar situation where we have the 2 heavy hitters facing off in Gabuzian and Jacobson. Now, it's important to note that Jacobson's game is still in progress against Conrad Holt, and the eval says equal, but anything could happen, and you know the danger of making predictions on games before you go off the air, so we'll have to wait until tomorrow to see. Now remember, these games are still going on at uschesschamps.com, so if you're watching on YouTube, head on over there to US Chess Champs and check out the Chess 24 module. Eric, I'd like to talk about, really quick, some upcoming broadcasts that we have to close out the year for 2018. The Fall Chess Classic, we're halfway through, but our pumpkin friend is going to transform into a snowman soon enough, because it will be time for the Winter Chess Classic. It's the same format, 2 10-player round robins, and you will see a different field. That's coming up next month, starting November 5 at uschesschamps.com. After that, we have a norm event, the St. Louis Invitational. Still 2 10-player round robins, but it is all about the norms. We'll have a Grandmaster norm field and an IM norm field, and we'll see who can walk out with a brand new shiny title or norm, and that's coming up starting November 16th. On the world stage, we're going to see Today in Chess. You know, the World Chess Championship is coming up starting November 9 in London, and we will have abbreviated coverage Today in Chess with the A-Team, the Super Friends, Yasser Seirawan, Jen Shahadi, and Maurice Ashley. But that's not all they'll be covering. Magnus Carlsen versus Caruana. They'll also be covering the Women's World Championship from Russia. They'll be talking about the 64-player knockout, where the world champion Zhu Wenjun will be walking in with no special privileges as the incumbent champion. Let's see who will walk out. And it's important to note that Sabina Foiser and Irina Krush, the 2 American ladies, will be competing in that gigantic knockout event. And then finally, we wrap up the year with the London Chess Classic, this year hosting the first ever Grand Chess Tour Finals. Hikaru Nakamura, Fabiano Caruana, Levan Aronian, and MVL will be playing in a 4-player knockout match event. You do not want to miss this. They'll be playing classical, rapid, and blitz. all rated by FIDE and rated by the Universal Rating System. And the winner of this knockout in London will be the 2018 Grand Chess Tour champion, and you can get all the information at grandchesstour.org. That starts on December 11th, and they will have the entire broadcast for you right down here in the wonderful St. Louis Chess Club basement, the studios.
Lot to look forward to. Yes. Amazing time for chess in these later winter months.
Yes. Well, we've still got 3 more days of the Fall Chess Classic. Remember, the games begin tomorrow at 1 p.m. Central, but we will be on the air 2.5 hours later at 3:30 p.m. Central. And if there's any super important games from here on out, you know, we're going to stay on until the end. You know, if there's anything that could decide this.
Gotta drink that Red Bull.
Yes. Yeah, they should be paying us.
They should.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that'll do it. This show was produced by the world's greatest B team. Tammy Hyde is out today, but Dennis LaRue is our streamer. You know Dennis. He's one of our YouTube famous instructors. Isaac Schrantz was graphics and audio man, as always, and Danny Machuca is your technical director. For International Master Eric Rosen, my name is Ben Simon. We say so long from the Show Me State. This has been a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club.